Burnout 3 Takedown is the third entry in the iconic series that would be developed by Criterion Games, but would also be the first game to be published by Electronic Arts for the PlayStation 2 and Xbox in 2004, as Acclaim Entertainment would go bankrupt in early 2004, leading to EA acquiring the rights to the series, and quite rightly so, because it had proven in the first two entries with Burnout and Burnout 2 Point of Impact, proven to be among some of the most successful racing games on the PlayStation 2 and in general at that time. So it was easy to see why EA would capitalise on the success of this franchise once they took it over. I have done previous videos on the previous two Burnout games, so I'll make sure to leave links to them in the description, and they're both fantastic games in their own right. But Burnout 3 would take a different approach. It still kept the fast-paced, frantic nature of the gameplay, but would change up many elements, even in terms of some of the slight changes to the visuals and some of the unique features that were present throughout the game, but just would change up certain elements. But they also added in the takedown feature, which means you could smash your opponents, off the road at any given time, but would also, as with typical EA racing games, would also implement rubber banding kind of style AI, so the AI opponents were a lot more aggressive and they would catch up with you all the time. So the only way to really win a race outright was to literally just keep smashing into your opponents and make them crash, and the more you crashed into your opponents and the more damage you would inflict would cause you to earn additional speed boosts and also to earn additional points, which you could then use to not only just win races, but you would unlock many of the game's tracks and additional cars. And like the previous games in the series, you could also unlock additional upgraded or souped up versions of the standard cars that you had from the beginning of the game. Plus there was additional elements added into many of the other modes, especially with the crash feature mode, where there was additional mechanics thrown in where you could literally explode the car with the press of a button or at different intervals, and even using an additional feature that when someone did crash into you or you lost control of the car and crashed into something, the gameplay by holding the R1 button would allow you to go into like takedown mode, so you could literally slow the crash down, but you could manipulate and maneuver the car across the road to get in the way of any opposing AI opponents that were coming behind you, so that you could actually crash into them, which would result in slowing them down and you would gain additional points before you would respawn. So this was a really cool feature, and it's something that had never been seen in games at that time. So Burnout 3 literally took everything that was popular with the original two games and just expanded on it in more ways that was even deemed possible at that time. It improved on the gameplay mechanics, the visuals, the handling physics, among many other features, while also making the game slightly more difficult to overtake or to get used to. And the game was critically received among various reviews, considering it to be the best game in the series outright, and even by today's standards. When you look at all the sequels, it is still the highest reviewed game in the series and is still considered to be the best game in the series hands down, and is also considered to be among, if not one of the best racing games ever seen on the PS2. And it falls in the same line of the likes of Need for Speed Underground 2 and even alongside of Gran Turismo 3 and 4, and those four games are pretty much the top tier of racing games on the PlayStation, period. And even with the later sequels, like there was many different spin-offs, like with Burnout Revenge, Burnout Dominator, even PSP ports on both the Nintendo DS, Sony PSP, and even the later open world variant with Burnout Paradise, which again is another phenomenal racing game that I also had in the PS3, and I absolutely love that game. But many fans still believe that Burnout 3 Takedown is hands down the best game in the series, and having spent time playing the game myself over the years, I can agree with that for a lot of those reasons, because again, it was the first game to implement a lot of the features that I've mentioned, but it just was something that was just very unique for its time, and I think it was just the right game in the right place at the right time, pretty much. And I think that's what added to its overall success, because it came out around the time when Need for Speed Underground 2 was literally blowing up in terms of success. You already had the likes of Gran Turismo 3, Gran Turismo 4 was in and around that time as well, plus you had a multitude of other racing games that were doing quite well, not just on the PlayStation but on other formats as well, with the likes of the Xbox and so forth. So Burnout 3 definitely fitted in with all of those games, so it definitely gave gamers a really good selection of different types of titles to play throughout that era. Plus as well, Burnout 3 would also allow for the use, similar to the Need for Speed games, where they would have officially licensed music tracks into the game as well, so that added a whole different element to the game, so you could listen to some of your favourite artists quests and tracks as you played as well. That was all presented in kind of like a radio station format, which made the game feel even more lifelike and more real, which was something that was really cool. And there was only a very few other games that had really done that beforehand. If you look at the likes of even Grand Theft Auto 3 or even the earlier Grand Theft Auto games, they used similar ideas in terms of how they presented music in the games. So it was interesting to see other racing games starting to do the same. But all in all, it is just a fantastic title. And the best thing about it, when you look at it from a viewpoint of racing games, each version of the Burnout series up until that point had gradually gotten better with each version of the game that came out. Now, one of my personal favourites is still Burnout 2 Point of Impact, because that was the game that really got me into the franchise, and I absolutely loved that game and I still love it. But I will admit, Burnout 3 Takedown is technically the better game when you consider the amount of options and just the amount of stuff that's in the game. It's just, there's so much stuff to do, and it just plays so well. And the thing is, even by today's standards, it's still a very, very solid and very, very good racer, and one of the best handling style racers with some of the best handling physics in a racing game on the PS2 that still holds well even by today's standards. And the fact is that Criterion developed these games. They would also later go on to develop the more modern Need for Speed games, so that's proof that they are really, really good at developing racing games. And it proves the point with the earlier Burnout games, and especially with Burnout Takedown. So pretty much the proof is in the pudding in that respect. You can see it for yourself. So whichever version of Burnout you enjoy, I'm sure there's one game in the series that really stands out to you more than the rest. For most people, I know myself, it is Burnout 3, because that's the one game that often gets talked about when you mention the series. And even for myself, I've had a lot of requests to do a video on Burnout 3 Takedown, and that seems to be one of the most requested games that people want to see a video on. So I think it's only natural, and quite rightly so, that I do a video on it, because everybody wants to see it and re-experience it, because clearly there's a lot of fans of the game out there, and I can understand why. It is really a good game, a solid game, a fantastic racing game, and for me it is one of the best racing games on the PS2, hands down. And I would love to know your thoughts on this iconic game if you have played it yourself, and if so, what are your memories of some of the experience you've had in the game, or what are the fun elements that you would have enjoyed the most. I'd love to hear whatever story you do have of this fantastic game, so be sure to share it down in the comments below. And if you have enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and hit that bell to be updated with future videos. And if you would like to see more content around other types of racing games also seen on the PS2, you can check out the playlist on screen to see more of those games in action. And I will see you all in the next one.